The alarm clock didn't go off that Sunday morning, but Diana woke up anyway. 7 months pregnant, sleep had become something that came in short bursts between bathroom trips and finding comfortable positions for her growing belly. She stretched carefully, feeling the baby shift inside her, and smiled despite her tiredness. Sunlight filtered through the bedroom curtains of their new home on Willow Creek Drive. They'd moved to Greenfield Heights just 3 months ago, and Diana still couldn't believe they actually lived here. The neighborhood was everything they'd dreamed of when they were newlyweds living in that tiny apartment downtown. Tree-lined streets, well-kept lawns, and houses that looked like they belonged in a magazine. Her husband Robert was already gone. Sunday mornings meant early meetings for him these days. His job kept him busy, sometimes working weekends when important decisions needed to be made. The neighbors probably thought he was just another businessman, maybe in sales or consulting. Diana liked it that way. They could just be a normal family here, without all the attention that came with Robert's position. She made herself some decaf coffee and toast, then stood by the kitchen window watching the neighborhood come to life. A man jogged past with his golden retriever. An elderly woman tended to her rose garden across the street. 2 kids rode their bikes in circles on the sidewalk while their parents watched from the porch. It looked so peaceful, so perfect. Diana had grown up in neighborhoods that were louder, busier, where everyone knew everyone else's business. This place was different, quieter, more private. Sometimes she missed the warmth of her old community, where neighbors would stop by with extra food or help carry groceries without being asked. Here people were polite but distant. They'd wave if they saw you, maybe comment on the weather, but that was about it. Still, she was determined to make it work. This was where they wanted to raise their daughter. Yes, it was going to be a girl. They'd found out last week, and Diana had spent hours imagining teaching her to ride a bike on these safe streets, walking her to the school just 6 blocks away, having birthday parties in their big backyard. The baby kicked, bringing Diana back to the present moment. The doctor had said walking was good for both of them, especially in the final months. Robert worried about her overdoing things, but sitting around the house all day made her restless. She grabbed her water bottle, phone, and keys, then stepped outside into the warm morning air. The first thing she noticed was how quiet it was. Back in her old neighborhood, Sunday mornings meant church bells, kids playing, music from open windows, and the sound of family gatherings spilling into yards. Here the silence felt almost sacred. Even the birds seemed to chirp more softly. She started walking slowly, taking in details she'd missed during their house hunting trips. The mailboxes were all different, but somehow matched perfectly. Some yards had white picket fences, others had low stone walls. Every lawn looked like it had been manicured by professionals. There wasn't a single piece of trash anywhere, not even a stray leaf that had escaped someone's rake. As she walked, Diana became aware of something else. Eyes. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but she felt watched. A curtain moved in a window as she passed. Someone stepped back from a doorway when she looked their direction. It wasn't obvious, but it was there. Maybe she was being paranoid. Pregnancy hormones could make you imagine things. She told herself they were probably just curious about the new neighbors. When you live somewhere for years, a new face stands out. They'd warm up eventually. It just took time to become part of a community like this. The streets curved gracefully through the development, each turn revealing another picture-perfect scene. Diana found herself slowing down more often, partly because walking was getting harder, but also because everything was so beautiful. She paused in front of a house with an amazing garden, full of flowers she couldn't name but wanted to learn about. Maybe she could ask the owner for tips once the baby came and she had time for her own garden. A woman came out to get her newspaper and glanced Diana's way. Diana smiled and raised her hand in a friendly wave. The woman looked startled, grabbed her paper quickly, and hurried back inside. Diana's smile faded a bit. Maybe she was having a bad day. 3 blocks into her walk, Diana realized she was thirstier than expected. The baby seemed to drink all her water these days. She spotted a small neighborhood park ahead with benches and a water fountain. Perfect timing. The park was tiny but charming, with playground equipment that looked brand new and a walking path that circled a small pond. 2 ducks swam lazily while a jogger passed by on the path. Diana made her way to the nearest bench and sat down carefully, grateful for the chance to rest. She pulled out her phone to check the time. Not even an hour had passed, but she was already tired. The baby was getting heavier every day and her back was starting to ache. She scrolled through her messages, hoping for a text from Robert about when he'd be home. Instead, she found a message from her sister asking how the new neighborhood was treating them. Diana started typing back that everything was wonderful, then stopped. Was it wonderful? The houses were beautiful, the streets were clean, and it felt safe. But something was missing. Warmth, maybe. Connection. She looked around the park again. It was so quiet. Back home, a park like this would have families having picnics, kids running around, maybe someone playing music or grilling food. Here, even on a beautiful Sunday morning, it felt almost empty. Diana shook her head. She was being unfair. It was still early and people had their own routines. Some families were probably at church. Others might be having lazy mornings at home. She couldn't expect every place to be like where she grew up. Her phone buzzed with a call from Robert. She smiled and answered quickly, happy to hear his voice. As they talked about his meeting and her walk, Diana felt better. This was their dream coming true, even if it felt different than she had expected. Sometimes dreams needed time to feel like home. The baby kicked again, stronger this time, and Diana laughed. Their daughter would grow up here, running through these safe streets, making friends with the neighbor kids, creating her own memories. That's what mattered most. She hung up the phone and took a deep breath of the clean morning air. Time to head back home and start planning the nursery. There was still so much to do before the baby arrived, and Robert would want to help when he got back from his meeting. Diana stood up slowly, using the bench arm for support, and started walking toward home. She didn't notice the woman across the street who had been watching her for the past 20 minutes, or the way that woman's expression had changed from curiosity to suspicion to something darker. All Diana knew was that she was tired. Her back hurt, and she was ready for a quiet afternoon at home with her husband when he returned. She had no idea that her peaceful morning walk was about to become the start of something that would change everything. Beverly Miller had lived on Elm Street for 17 years. She knew every house, every family, every routine in their quiet neighborhood. She knew that the Johnsons left for church at exactly 9:15 every Sunday. She knew that Mr. Peterson walked his terrier at 7:30 sharp, rain or shine. She knew which houses got newspaper deliveries and which ones didn't. What she didn't know was who this woman was, sitting on the park bench for the past 20 minutes, constantly looking at her phone. Beverly stood at her living room window, coffee mug in hand, watching through the sheer curtains. The woman looked out of place. She was walking too slowly, stopping too often, looking at houses too carefully. And now she was just sitting there, clearly planning something while she texted or made calls. This was exactly the kind of thing the neighborhood watch group had warned about. Criminals these days were smart. They'd send someone to scout neighborhoods first, someone who wouldn't look suspicious, someone like a pregnant woman who could walk around without anyone questioning her presence. Beverly had seen the news stories. Home invasions were happening everywhere, even in nice neighborhoods like theirs, maybe especially in neighborhoods like theirs, where people had nice things worth stealing. The police always said the same thing afterward. Residents should have been more alert, should have reported suspicious activity sooner. The woman on the bench stood up and started walking again, this time heading down Beverly's street. Beverly moved to the front window for a better view. The woman was looking at house numbers, clearly searching for something specific. When she slowed down in front of the Hendersons' place, Beverly's heart rate picked up. The Hendersons were visiting their daughter in Florida for 2 weeks. Everyone knew their house was empty. That settled it. Beverly grabbed her phone and called Janet Morrison, the neighborhood watch coordinator. "Janet, it's Beverly. There's a suspicious person walking through the neighborhood. She's been here for over an hour, just wandering around and sitting in the park while she makes phone calls. Now she's looking at the empty houses. Are you sure she doesn't live here?" Janet asked. "Sometimes people rent places short-term through those apps. I know everyone on this street, Janet. She doesn't belong here. And the way she's acting, looking around so carefully, checking her phone constantly, it's not normal." Janet agreed it was worth investigating. "Why don't you go talk to her? Just friendly conversation. If she really lives here, she'll be happy to chat with a neighbor." Beverly had never been one to back down from protecting her community. She'd organized the neighborhood watch program, coordinated the annual block parties, and made sure everyone looked out for each other. If someone was planning to cause trouble in her neighborhood, she was going to stop it. She put on her shoes and walked outside, trying to look casual. The woman had moved on from the Henderson house and was now standing in front of the Miller's old place, the one that had been sold 3 months ago. Beverly picked up her pace. "Excuse me," she called out, putting on her friendliest voice. "Beautiful morning, isn't it?" The woman turned around and Beverly got her first close look at her. She was younger than Beverly had expected, probably in her late 20s and very pregnant. She wore expensive-looking workout clothes and carried a designer water bottle. Nothing about her appearance suggested criminal activity, but Beverly knew appearances could be deceiving. "Yes, it really is," the woman replied with a genuine smile. "I love mornings like this. I don't think we've met. I'm Beverly Miller. I live in the blue house with the white shutters." Beverly gestured toward her home. "Nice to meet you. I'm Diana." She didn't offer a last name, Beverly noticed. Another red flag. "Are you visiting someone in the neighborhood?" Beverly asked, watching Diana's reaction carefully. "Actually, I live here now. My husband and I moved in a few months ago." Diana pointed toward a house at the end of the street. "We're in the gray colonial." Beverly's eyes narrowed. She knew that house well. The previous owners, an elderly couple, had moved to a retirement community. The house had sold quickly to some out-of-town buyers who'd paid cash. She'd never actually seen the new owners, which was unusual in a neighborhood where everyone eventually crossed paths. "Oh, the Henderson place?" Beverly said, testing her. Diana looked confused. "No, the one at the end? With the big oak tree in front." "Right, of course." Beverly felt a small pang of uncertainty but pushed it aside. Anyone could point to a random house and claim to live there. "So what brings you out for a walk this morning?" "Just getting some exercise. The doctor says walking is good for the baby." Diana rubbed her belly affectionately. "And your husband? Does he work around here?" Diana hesitated for just a moment. "He works for the city. He's at a meeting this morning." Beverly caught the hesitation. "What department?" "He works with community development and planning." Diana's answer sounded rehearsed. "That's interesting. I know several people who work for the city." "What's his name? Maybe I know him." Diana shifted uncomfortably. "He's pretty busy. Doesn't socialize much with work people." Every answer made Beverly more suspicious. Why wouldn't someone be happy to talk about their husband's job? Why the vague responses about where they lived? And why had she been walking around for so long, looking at houses and making phone calls? "You know, I've been living on this street for 17 years, Beverly said, her friendly tone starting to slip. "I make it my business to know my neighbors. For safety reasons. We all look out for each other here." "That sounds nice," Diana said, but she took a small step backward. "So I find it odd that I've never seen you or your husband. Never seen your car in that driveway. Never seen any lights on in the evenings." Diana's expression changed from friendly to wary. "We keep to ourselves. And my husband travels for work sometimes." "Uh-huh." Beverly crossed her arms. "And you just happened to be walking around taking pictures of houses with your phone?" "I wasn't taking pictures. I was texting my sister and checking the time. From what I saw, you were on that phone constantly, looking at different houses, sitting in the park for 20 minutes like you were waiting for something." Diana's face flushed. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I was just taking a walk in my own neighborhood." "Your neighborhood?" Beverly's voice rose. "Prove it. If you really live in that house, you should have a key. Let's walk over there right now and you can show me." "I don't have to prove anything to you," Diana said firmly. "I don't know what you think is happening here, but I'm just a pregnant woman trying to get some exercise. A pregnant woman who can't answer simple questions about where she lives or what her husband does for work." Beverly pulled out her phone. "You know what? I think I should call the police and let them sort this out." Diana stared at her in disbelief. "You want to call the police because I'm walking in my own neighborhood?" "I want to call the police because you're acting suspicious and refusing to provide any proof that you actually live here." "This is ridiculous. I don't owe you any explanations." Beverly was already dialing. "We'll see what the police think about that." Diana stood there for a moment, looking shocked and hurt. Beverly had expected her to run or make excuses, but instead she just looked tired and sad. "I can't believe this is happening," Diana said quietly, more to herself than to Beverly. "If you're innocent, then you have nothing to worry about," Beverly replied, waiting for someone to answer her call. But as Diana walked away slowly, one hand supporting her back and the other protectively over her belly, Beverly felt the first tiny seed of doubt creep into her mind. The woman really did look exhausted and upset, not like someone who'd been caught doing something wrong. Still, Beverly had made the call. She'd done what any responsible neighbor would do. If she was wrong, they'd sort it out quickly and everyone could go on with their day. She had no way of knowing that her phone call was about to set off a chain of events that would make headlines, divide their community, and change everything she thought she knew about the quiet street she'd called home for 17 years. Officer David Chen had been with the Greenfield Heights Police Department for 12 years. In that time, he'd responded to thousands of calls, but very few had made him feel as uncomfortable as this one. When dispatch told him they were responding to a suspicious person complaint, he'd expected the usual. Maybe a door-to-door salesman in the wrong neighborhood, or a lost delivery driver. He hadn't expected to find a visibly pregnant woman standing calmly on a tree-lined street, looking more confused than threatening. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Chen, and this is Officer Rodriguez," he said as they approached Diana. "We received a call about someone acting suspiciously in the neighborhood. Would you mind answering a few questions?" Diana looked from one officer to the other, her expression shifting from confusion to something that might have been resignation. "Of course. Though I have to say I'm not sure what this is about." Officer Rodriguez, who was newer to the force but had quickly earned a reputation for being thorough and fair, stepped forward. "Can you tell us what you're doing in this area today?" "I live here," Diana said simply. "I was taking a walk because my doctor said exercise is good for the baby." She gestured to her pregnant belly. "I moved to this neighborhood 3 months ago with my husband." Chen exchanged a glance with his partner. The woman seemed genuinely puzzled by their presence, not nervous or evasive like most people they encountered, who were actually up to something. "Which house do you live in?" Rodriguez asked. Diana pointed toward the end of the street. "The gray colonial with the oak tree. We bought it from the couple who moved to Sunset Manor." Chen knew the house. The previous owners had been pillars of the community for decades. If this woman really lived there, it would explain why some neighbors might not recognize her yet. "Do you have any identification with you?" Rodriguez asked. "Of course." Diana reached into her small crossbody bag and pulled out her wallet. She handed over her driver's license without hesitation. Rodriguez examined it carefully. "Diana Washington, 247 Willow Creek Drive." She looked up at Diana. "That's the address you pointed to?" "Yes." Chen took the license and studied it. Everything looked legitimate. The photo matched, the address was correct, and there were no obvious signs of tampering. But he'd learned to be thorough. "Mrs. Washington, the person who called, said you'd been in the area for over an hour, looking at different houses. Can you explain that?" Diana's expression darkened slightly. "I was taking a walk. I stopped to rest at the park because I get tired easily these days." She rubbed her lower back. "Then I was walking home when a woman approached me and started asking me questions about where I lived and what my husband does for work." "And what did you tell her?" "The truth. That we live at the end of the street and that my husband works for the city." Diana's voice carried a note of frustration, but apparently that wasn't good enough for her. Chen walked back to the patrol car and radioed dispatch. "Can you run a license for Diana Washington, 247 Willow Creek Drive?" He read off the license number and waited. While they waited for confirmation, Rodriguez continued talking with Diana. "Your husband works for the city?" "Yes, he's in administration." Diana's phone started ringing. She glanced at the screen and her face softened. "Actually, that's him calling now. He's worried because I told him about the strange encounter I had with that woman." Chen walked back over just as dispatch confirmed that the license was valid and the address matched city records. Diana Washington was indeed a resident of Willow Creek Drive, and the property records showed that she and her husband Robert had purchased the home 3 months earlier. "Mrs. Washington," Chen said, "I'm sorry for the inconvenience. Your identification checks out, and you clearly have every right to be in this neighborhood." Diana looked relieved but still upset. "So what happens now?" "I was just trying to take a peaceful walk in my own neighborhood." "We'll need to speak with the person who called this in," Rodriguez explained. "It appears there was a misunderstanding." Diana's phone was still ringing. "Do you mind if I answer this?" "My husband is going to worry if I don't pick up." "Go ahead," Chen said. Diana answered the call and immediately put it on speaker, perhaps wanting the officers to hear that this was indeed just a concerned spouse. "Hi, honey, sorry I didn't answer earlier. I'm fine, but something weird is happening." The voice that came through the phone was deep and authoritative. What do you mean something weird? Are you okay? I'm okay, but a neighbor called the police on me for walking while pregnant, apparently. The officers are here now and they've been very professional, but I still can't believe this happened. Chen felt his blood pressure spike as he recognized the voice. Every officer in the department knew that voice from city meetings, budget presentations, and community events. Diana, where exactly are you right now? The voice asked. I'm on Elm Street near where it intersects with Willow Creek. I'm on my way. This is completely unacceptable. Chen looked at Rodriguez, whose eyes had gone wide. She'd recognized the voice too. Mrs. Washington, Chen said carefully. Is your husband Robert Washington? Yes, why? Rodriguez cleared her throat. Ma'am, your husband is... He's the mayor of Greenfield Heights, Diana nodded. Yes, he is. Is that a problem? Chen felt like the ground was shifting under his feet. They just spent 15 minutes investigating a suspicious person complaint against the mayor's wife. The mayor's pregnant wife who was taking a walk in her own neighborhood. No, ma'am, that's not a problem at all, he said quickly. In fact, this changes our understanding of the situation significantly. By now, a small crowd of neighbors had gathered on the sidewalk, drawn by the police cars and flashing lights. Chen could see Beverly Miller standing in her doorway, watching everything unfold. He was going to have a very uncomfortable conversation with her very soon. Diana was still on the phone with her husband. Robert, everyone's staring at me like I'm some kind of criminal. I just wanted to take a walk. I know, sweetheart. I'm 5 minutes away. Officer Chen, are you there? Chen stepped closer to the phone.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, we're here. I want to be clear that my wife has done nothing wrong.
She was exercising in her own neighborhood, which should be the most normal thing in the world. Absolutely, sir. We've confirmed her identity and address. This appears to be a case of mistaken concern. Mistaken concern? Robert's voice was tight with controlled anger. Is that what we're calling racial profiling now? The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Chen felt the weight of them, along with the realization that this incident was about to become much bigger than a simple neighborhood misunderstanding. Diana ended the call and looked at the two officers. You know what the hardest part is? I moved to this neighborhood because I thought it would be safe for my daughter to grow up here. I thought people would judge us by our character, not by assumptions. Chen opened his mouth to respond, but he was interrupted by the sound of a car approaching quickly. A black sedan pulled up behind the patrol cars, and Mayor Robert Washington got out. Even in casual Sunday clothes, Robert Washington commanded attention. He was tall, well-dressed, and carried himself with the confidence of someone used to being in charge. But as he walked toward his wife, Chen could see the concern and anger in his expression. Diana, are you all right? Robert asked, immediately going to his wife's side. I'm fine, just tired and upset. Robert looked at the two officers. Thank you for handling this professionally. I know this isn't your fault. Then his gaze moved to the crowd of neighbors who were still watching from a distance. But someone thought it was appropriate to call the police on a pregnant woman for taking a walk. Someone thought my wife looked so dangerous, so out of place in her own neighborhood, that she needed to be investigated. Chen realized that whatever happened next, this quiet Sunday morning in Greenfield Heights had just become a defining moment for everyone involved. The mayor's wife hadn't just been questioned by police, she'd been profiled, questioned, and made to feel unwelcome in the community she'd chosen to call home. And now, with the mayor himself standing on Elm Street surrounded by patrol cars and curious neighbors, everyone was going to have to face some very uncomfortable truths about what had really happened here. The news van arrived on Elm Street before lunch. Beverly Miller watched from behind, her living room curtains as reporters set up their equipment, on the sidewalk directly across from her house. Her phone had been ringing nonstop since word got out that the mayor's wife had been the target of her 911 call. Friends, family members, and people she didn't even know were calling to ask if it was true, if she was the neighbor who'd called police on Diana Washington. Beverly's stomach churned as she remembered the moment, 4 hours earlier, when Officer Chen had knocked on her door to explain what had happened. The look of disappointment in his eyes when he told her that Diana was indeed a resident of the neighborhood. Not just any resident, but the mayor's wife would haunt her for weeks to come. Mrs. Miller, Officer Chen had said gently, Mrs. Washington is a legitimate resident of this community. She was doing exactly what she said she was doing, taking a walk in her own neighborhood. Beverly had felt the world tilt beneath her feet, but she couldn't answer my questions properly. She was vague about everything. Ma'am, with respect, Mrs. Washington didn't owe you any answers. She was under no obligation to prove herself to you. The truth hit Beverly like a physical blow. She'd been so convinced she was protecting her neighborhood that she'd never stopped to consider whether her suspicions were based on anything real, or just on the fact that Diana looked different from everyone else on their street. Now, as Beverly watched Mayor Washington give an impromptu press conference on the sidewalk, she realized the full weight of what she'd done. My wife moved to this neighborhood because she believed it would be a safe place to raise our daughter, Robert was saying to the assembled reporters. She thought she could take a morning walk without being treated like a criminal. What happened today shows that we still have work to do as a community. Diana stood beside her husband, one hand resting on her pregnant belly, looking tired but composed. When a reporter asked how she felt about the incident, her answer was measured and thoughtful. "I'm disappointed, but I'm not surprised," Diana said. "This kind of thing happens to people who look like me more often than most people realize. The difference is that this time it happened to someone married to the mayor, so it's getting attention." Carol knocked on Beverly's door, her face full of concern. "Beverly, honey, are you okay? I've been watching the news and they're saying some terrible things about what happened." Beverly let her in, grateful for a friendly face. "Carol, I think I made a terrible mistake. You were just trying to protect the neighborhood. Anyone would have done the same thing." But even as Carol said the words, Beverly could hear doubt in her voice. Would anyone have done the same thing? Would Beverly have questioned a pregnant white woman walking through the neighborhood the same way she'd questioned Diana? The honest answer made Beverly feel sick. On television, the story was already spreading beyond local news. Social media posts about the incident were being shared thousands of times. Some people were defending Beverly, saying she'd acted reasonably based on what she observed. Others were calling it a clear case of racial profiling and demanding accountability. What bothered Beverly most was that many of the people defending her were saying things she didn't want to be associated with. Comments about certain people and urban crime and protecting our neighborhoods from outsiders. That wasn't who she thought she was. That wasn't what she thought she'd been doing. Meanwhile, 3 blocks away, Diana and Robert Washington were having their own difficult conversations. "Maybe we should move," Diana said as they sat in their kitchen, away from the media circus outside. "Find somewhere else to raise the baby." Robert took her hands in his. "We shouldn't have to move. This is our home. We chose this neighborhood, we love this house, and we have every right to be here. But what if it happens again? What if next time it's our daughter walking through the neighborhood and someone calls the police on her?" Robert didn't have a good answer for that. As mayor, he'd worked hard to make Greenfield Heights a welcoming community for everyone. But this incident had shown him how much work was still needed. "We can use this as an opportunity," he said finally, "to start conversations that need to happen, to help people understand how their actions affect their neighbors." Over the next few days, the story continued to grow. Mayor Washington announced that the city would host a series of community dialogue sessions about bias, inclusion, and what it meant to be neighbors. Some residents embraced the idea immediately. Others were resistant, feeling like they were being lectured or blamed for something they didn't do. Beverly struggled with whether to attend the first meeting. Part of her wanted to hide until the whole thing blew over, but a larger part of her knew she needed to face what had happened and try to understand how she'd gotten it so wrong. The community center was packed on the Tuesday evening of the first dialogue session. Beverly arrived early and chose a seat toward the back, hoping to avoid attention. But when Diana Washington walked in with her husband, their eyes met across the room. Beverly expected to see anger or hostility in Diana's face. Instead, she saw something that looked almost like sadness. Diana nodded slightly in acknowledgement, then took a seat several rows ahead. The conversation that night was awkward, sometimes heated, but ultimately productive. Residents shared their own experiences with bias and exclusion. A few people admitted they'd made similar assumptions about new neighbors who didn't look like them. Others talked about times they'd felt unwelcome in spaces where they had every right to be. When the floor was opened for questions, Beverly surprised herself by standing up. Her voice shook as she spoke. "I'm Beverly Miller. I'm the person who called the police on Mrs. Washington." The room went quiet. "I've been thinking about this for days, trying to understand why I reacted the way I did. I want to apologize publicly to Mrs. Washington and her family for the pain I caused." Diana turned around in her seat, and Beverly continued. "I thought I was being a good neighbor, protecting my community. But I realize now that I wasn't treating Mrs. Washington like a neighbor at all. I was treating her like an outsider, someone who didn't belong based on nothing more than my own assumptions." The room remained silent as Beverly sat back down. At the end of the evening, as people were filing out, Diana approached her. "Mrs. Miller," she said quietly, "thank you for what you said tonight. That couldn't have been easy." Beverly felt tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm so sorry. I don't know how to make this right." "You already started," Diana replied, "by being willing to look at what happened honestly. By being here tonight." Over the following weeks, the neighborhood slowly began to heal. Not everyone was ready to examine their own biases, and some residents remained defensive about the incident. But many others used it as a catalyst for genuine self-reflection and change. Beverly threw herself into community service, volunteering for programs that helped new residents feel welcome in Greenfield Heights. She and Diana would never be close friends, but they developed a respectful relationship based on honest acknowledgement of what had happened. When Diana's daughter was born 2 months later, neighbors throughout the community sent cards and gifts. Beverly's gift was a small potted oak tree, grown from an acorn from the tree in Diana and Robert's front yard, with a note that read, "For your daughter's future neighborhood adventures. May she always feel safe and welcome wherever she walks." The incident on Elm Street became a turning point for Greenfield Heights, not because it solved all problems with bias and prejudice, but because it forced a community to confront uncomfortable truths about assumptions, fear, and what it really means to be neighbors. Years later, when Diana's daughter asked about the story she'd heard whispered at school, Diana told her the truth about that Sunday morning. She explained that sometimes good people make bad decisions based on fear and unfamiliarity, but that what matters most is what everyone chooses to do next. The little girl listened carefully, then asked if she could meet Beverly Miller, the woman who'd made the mistake but worked so hard to make things better. Diana smiled and said yes, they could arrange that. After all, they were neighbors.